Welcome to our deep dive into the formation of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or BNS. This landmark legislation aims to replace the entire Indian Penal Code, introducing a fresh approach to penalties and punishments for crimes. Passed by the Lok Sabha on December 20, 2023, and the Rajya Sabha on December 21, 2023, it received presidential assent on December 25, 2023. The enforcement date is set for July 1, 2024. With 20 chapters and 358 sections, BNS is poised to reshape criminal law in India. Let's explore its core principles and the impact it will have on society. Primary purpose of the BNS is to modernize the approach to criminal penalties and punishments. Unlike the previous code, BNS emphasizes a new pattern for defining crimes and their consequences. In criminal proceedings, the state acts as a party because crime is not just a wrong against an individual, but also against society as a whole. This collective responsibility underscores the importance of law in maintaining public welfare and moral sentiments. Crime, as defined under BNS, is an act forbidden by law and against the moral sentiments of society. It is punishable by law, either because it is forbidden by the state or injurious to public welfare. This dual nature of crime, legal and moral, ensures that criminal acts are recognized not only for their impact on individuals, but also for their broader societal implications. General principles of criminal liability under BNS revolve around two key concepts, Actus Reus and Mens Rea. These Latin terms are foundational in criminal law. Actus Reus refers to the physical act of committing a crime, while Mens Rea relates to the mental intent behind the act. The maxim, actus non facit reum nisi mens sit rea, means that an act alone does not make a person guilty unless accompanied by a guilty mind. Several legal maxims illustrate the interplay between act and intention. Actus meum vito factus non est mens actus means an act done against one's will is not considered one's act. In Fowler versus Padget, 1798, the court held that both intention and act must concur to constitute a crime. Similarly, R versus Allday, 1837, emphasized that no man is guilty unless his mind is guilty, reinforcing the importance of mens rea. In criminal law, a crime generally consists of two elements, actus reus and mens rea. There can be actus reus without mens rea, such as when a child accidentally causes harm. Conversely, mens rea without actus reus is recognized in ethics or religion, where evil intent may exist without physical action. However, mens rea alone is not punishable unless it manifests in an act. There are exceptions to the general rule that intention alone is not a crime. For example, conspiracy to commit a crime or intention to commit crimes against the state can be punishable even without an overt act. Certain sections of BNS, such as 61, 147, 148, 149, 150, 152, and 310(5), address these exceptions, highlighting the complexity of criminal liability. Sometimes an act alone is sufficient to constitute a crime, even without mens rea. This is known as strict liability. Offences under strict liability are often created for public purposes, such as food adulteration or environmental protection. In these cases, the law prioritizes public welfare over individual intent, ensuring accountability regardless of mental state. Criminal liability is mainly penal in nature. When determining the appropriate punishment, three factors are considered: the motive behind the crime, the magnitude of the offence, and the character of the offender. These factors help ensure that penalties are fair and proportionate, reflecting both the seriousness of the act and the circumstances surrounding it. Intention is an abstract idea and can be difficult to establish in court. To determine intention, surrounding facts and circumstances are examined. This investigative approach helps courts understand the mental state of the accused, providing context for the actions and supporting the determination of guilt or innocence. In England, mens rea was traditionally considered essential in common law offences. However, its applicability in statutory offences has been debated. In R versus Prince, 1875, the court convicted the accused without applying mens rea, while in R versus Tolson, 1889, the court acquitted the accused, recognizing good faith. Justice Goodhart clarified in Brand versus Wood, 1947, that mens rea applies to statutory offences unless expressly denied by legislation. Under Indian law, scholars like Sir J.D. Mine, Rattanlal, and Dr. Gower argued that mens rea is out of place in BNS, as each offence is defined with its own requirements. However, this view is not universally accepted. Mens rea is applied in BNS through specific terms like dishonestly and fraudulently, as well as through general exceptions that presume its absence. Supreme Court of India has affirmed mens rea as an essential ingredient of offences, unless the contrary is shown in the Act. Notably, in State of Maharashtra versus M.H. George, 1965, and Nathu Lal versus State of Madhya Pradesh, 1966, the court held that intention must be proven for criminal liability. Despite mens rea not being explicitly defined or mentioned in BNS sections, its importance is recognised in judicial practice. There are certain offences where mens rea is not applicable. Strict liability offences, such as those under the Food Adulteration Act, do not require proof of intent. Similarly, acts made for public welfare, punishable by fines, like the Motor Vehicles Act and Arms Act, are exceptions. Modern laws also provide for absolute liability, as seen in environmental protection statutes like the Water Act. Mens rea refers to the guilty mind, while motive explains why the act was done. Motive is the ulterior intention, prompting a person to form an immediate intention. Intention relates to the means, whereas motive relates to the end. In criminal law, intention is relevant for liability, while motive is generally considered irrelevant. And there is clear proof of motive for a crime. It supports the court's finding of guilt. However, the absence of motive does not necessarily mean innocence. There can be offences without motive, and strong motives may not always lead to criminal acts. Purity of motive cannot absolve criminal liability. For example, killing starving children with good intentions is still a crime. In criminal law, the general rule is that motive is irrelevant, and only intention matters. Courts focus on whether the accused had the immediate mental condition to commit the act, rather than the underlying reasons. This distinction ensures that liability is based on the act and intent, not the purpose behind it. Summarize, BNS represents a significant shift in Indian criminal law. It replaces the Indian Penal Code, introduces new patterns for penalties, and emphasizes the dual elements of Actus Reus and Mens Rea. The law recognizes exceptions, strict and absolute liability, and clarifies the roles of intention and motive. With its enforcement, BNS aims to create a more just and effective legal framework. In criminal proceedings, the state is always a party, reflecting the idea that crime is not just a private wrong but a public one. This principle ensures that the interests of society are protected and that justice is served not only for the victim but for the community at large. The BNS reinforces this concept, making the state an active participant in the pursuit of justice. Crime is not only forbidden by law but also goes against the moral sentiments of society. This dual aspect ensures that criminal acts are recognized for their impact on both legal and ethical grounds. The BNS acknowledges this, aiming to uphold both the rule of law and societal values. Actus Reus refers to the physical act or conduct that constitutes a crime. It is the tangible element, such as theft, assault, or murder. Without Actus Reus, there can be no crime, as the law requires a demonstrable action. The BNS continues to emphasize the necessity of a physical act in establishing criminal liability. Mens rea is the mental element of a crime, referring to the guilty mind or intention behind the act. It distinguishes accidental acts from intentional wrongdoing. The BNS recognizes mens rea as a crucial factor, ensuring that only those with a guilty mind are held criminally liable, except in cases of strict or absolute liability. A classic example illustrating Actus Reus without mens rea is when an infant accidentally causes harm. For instance, a 2-year-old playing with a loaded pistol may unintentionally kill someone. Here, the physical act exists, but the child lacks the mental intent, demonstrating the importance of both elements in criminal liability. In ethics or religion, mens rea without Actus Reus can be considered a wrong. An evil deed committed in the mind may constitute a moral wrong, even if it has not manifested in physical conduct. However, in law, mens rea alone is not punishable unless accompanied by an act. Certain crimes, such as conspiracy or intention to commit offences against the state, are punishable even without a physical act. These exceptions are recognized in BNS, reflecting the seriousness of threats to public order and national security. The law addresses these cases to prevent harm before it occurs. Offences created for public purposes, such as food safety or environmental protection, often operate under strict or absolute liability. In these cases, the law prioritizes public welfare, holding individuals accountable regardless of intent. This approach ensures that societal interests are safeguarded. Modern laws such as the Water Act introduce absolute liability, where neither intent nor negligence is required for punishment. This ensures that those responsible for public harm are held accountable, regardless of their mental state. Absolute liability is a powerful tool for protecting public interests. While motive can lend support to a court's finding of guilt, its absence does not necessarily mean innocence. There may be offences without motive, and strong motives may not always lead to criminal acts. The purity of motive cannot absolve criminal liability, as the law focuses on intention and action. Intention is the immediate mental condition leading to an act, while motive is the underlying reason. In criminal law, only intention is relevant for liability. This distinction ensures that courts focus on the act and the mental state at the time, rather than the broader purpose. The formation of BNS marks a new era in Indian criminal law. By redefining crime, emphasizing Actus Reus and mens rea, and clarifying exceptions and liability, BNS aims to create a fairer and more effective legal system. As we move forward, understanding these principles will be crucial for legal professionals, students, and society at large.